Hi, it's Ray. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my TBR for the month of May. I'm super excited for this video because for all of May I'm going to be participating in Katie from Books and Things' readathon that she's doing for that month, which is called the 1900 to 1950 readathon. I'll link her announcement video down below. I'll also quickly run through the readathon and what's entailed so that my TBR makes sense. Obviously it's pretty self-explanatory that this is a readathon focusing on reading books written between 1900 and 1950. Within that remit there are 5 particular prompts. Number 1 is to read a book from the country that you're from. Number 2 is to read a book from a different country to the country that you're from. Number 3 is to read a genre classic, so like historical fiction, crime, children's fiction, something like that. Number 4 is to read something published during that era which is not a novel, so like non-fiction, poetry, short stories, a collection of letters, something like that. And number 5 is to read a book written either during or exploring World War I or World War II. There's then a kind of bonus prompt which is to read something from every decade, so 1900s up to the 1940s. As I was putting my TBR together, I was thinking about a few things, obviously juggling the prompts, juggling the decades, but I also wanted to focus on either finishing books that are on my currently reading list that I haven't got around to finishing, or reading stuff that was actually on my bookshelf rather than buying too many new books. So I've decided to try and go for the bonus challenge and read a book from every decade because I know that I will have so much fun doing that. Instead of going through my TBR by prompt, I'm going to go through by decade and then just briefly mention how each book ties into the prompts. Okay, so for the 1900s, I have a book that was actually published in 1900. This is The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Don't know how you pronounce his surname. This is a children's book, obviously a super famous film. I've seen the film, but I've never read the book. You'll kind of know if you've been watching my channel for a while that classic children's literature is sort of my thing, and so this has been fairly high up my list of books that I need to get around to for a while. I'm not like wild about the film, and so I'm not necessarily feeling really confident that I'm gonna be crazy in love with the book, but it will nonetheless be interesting to read. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz ties into the prompts as both a genre classic and a book written in a different country to my own. I'm from the UK. For the 1910s, I have an option of 2 different books on here. I will probably only read one of them. The one that I would really most like to read is The Rainbow by D.H. Lawrence. I've been craving reading this book for so long. I love the writing of D.H. Lawrence that I've read so far. I've read Sons and Lovers, Lady Chatterley's Lover, and a short novella by him that was called The Virgin and the Gypsy, but I haven't read any D.H. Lawrence for quite a number of years. His writing I just find absolutely stunning and so perceptive. I also really love him because of his sense of place. He's really grounded in Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, and I am from and grew up in Nottingham, so he's like the one author who really sets himself in the Midlands, which I feel is just such an underrepresented part of the UK in literature, and being from there obviously get like a massive kick of joy just out of him mentioning places whose names actually mean something to me. The Rainbow is a historical fiction. It says it's about 3 generations of the Brangwyn family of Nottinghamshire from the 1840s to the early years of the 20th century. Already sounds great. I love a family saga. It's also the prequel to Women in Love, which is renowned as arguably Lawrence's best work, and so I really want to read this so that I can then move on to reading Women in Love. I don't know much more about the story than that first line of the blurb. The other really interesting thing about this book is that it says his frank representation of sexuality caused a furore, and the novel was seized by the police and banned almost as soon as it was published. I believe that he particularly explores female sexuality in this book, so I'm just super intrigued to see how that's done. I would love to read this. The reason that I haven't put it down as a definite is that it is quite long. As you can see, the font is pretty small. It's like over 400 pages of quite small font, and I know that May is going to be a really, really busy work month for me. And although The Wizard of Oz is a nice light read, basically everything else that I have on my TBR is quite a heavy, dense, and long read. Therefore, I have another option from the 1910s if I need it, and that is O Pioneers by Willa, Cather. This is only about 150 pages. It is the first novel in the Prairie trilogy by Willa Cather. It's not actually a trilogy, it's just 3 books that are complete standalones that are set on the prairie. I read my first Willa Cather last year and I loved it. Like, I don't know how I'd never heard of Willa Cather before. I literally stumbled across it because it was a free audiobook and I liked the name of the title. There was nothing more clever than that behind my picking it up, and I just absolutely adored her writing. She was lyrical, she was beautiful, her characters were rich, deep, interesting. Oh Pioneers, I think is potentially supposed to be even better than My Antonia, so would also really love to read that. So that's a nice alternative option if I don't get around to the Rainbow. On to the 1920s, I have selected Goodbye to All That by Robert Graves. It's very helpful in terms of ticking off the prompts for me because it both covers the not a book prompt, it's a memoir, and it also covers set in or exploring the world wars. So this is Graves's memoir about his time growing up in the UK, attending boarding school, which he loathed, and then fighting in World War I, which he also, unsurprisingly, loathed. And I believe he then goes to live abroad, and it's his reflection back over his childhood and youth in the UK, and basically it sounds quite depressing, but as I understand it, his analysis of everything that the UK stands for that he is saying goodbye to. I think particularly it will be that kind of early 20th century culture of play up and play the game, the sort of toxic masculinity, the stiff upper lip society, which caused so much trauma for so many boys and young men. I think particularly upper class boys and young men who grew up in the UK during that time period. It just sounds absolutely fascinating. I've never read anything by Robert Graves. He wrote I, Claudius is his kind of famous novel, but haven't read anything by him, and I'm so looking forward to reading Goodbye to All That. I'm increasingly realising as I get older as well that I really love memoir and have hardly read any, so it's a genre that I'm definitely looking to explore more of. Onto the 1930s, I have The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. This is a book which I started actually about this time last year maybe, which is bad, and then just put down and haven't picked up again. I am further through it than I thought that I was. However, I might just go back to the beginning and restart because honestly I haven't read this for so long. It certainly didn't grip me at the beginning, but so many people have told me so much about how good this book is. But also that this is a book that kind of really picks up from between halfway and the end. So I am definitely going to give it another go and finish it, whether I like it or not. I feel like it's a book that is worth reading all the way to the end. This ticks book from a country that is not my own, and it explores the kind of problematic side of the American dream, particularly looking at how farmers and their entire families were forced to travel west to California against their will in this kind of mass exodus from their homes because of all the new machinery that was brought in, the kind of dust bowl that this had created of Oklahoma. I think it's a very heartbreaking but incredibly beautifully told story. Certainly, as you can see, I have actually read quite a lot of it, and the writing style is so lyrical, so beautiful, just the kind of thing that I normally really enjoy, so maybe I just wasn't quite in the right place for it when I read it before. And this readathon is a great opportunity to push me back into picking it up and finishing it off. The same goes for my final read for the 1940s. This is Titus, Groan by Mervyn. It's the first book in his Gast trilogy. This is not quite an official trilogy. I think he intended to write it as a series of books but died after only 3 had been written. And these books explore this kind of fantastical, massive, crumbling castle and the politics within the castle walls, between the servants, between the kind of royal family who live there and rule over the land. It's a fantasy without explicit magical elements, but it's just set in this world which is very clearly different to our own. This is another book which I started quite a while ago. I think I started it last November or December, and I'm really enjoying it, but I just ended up with like a load of other things that I was reading at the same time, and then it had been so long since I read it that I was kind of had lost my place, and so exactly the same as with Grapes of Wrath, I think I'm going to go back and begin this again. Gast, I think is going to be so up my street. I'm so excited to be making the time to finish it. Mervyn Peake's writing just feels so like Dickens. It feels like if Dickens had written a fantasy book. The characters are so eccentric. They have like funny twitches, they have funny names that are kind of representative of their personalities. The writing is just so rich and dense and wonderful. I'm enjoying it so much so far, and I am so excited to read more of it. It's also quite tense, quite dark, quite a gothic feeling book. One that I think there is a lot of fun to be had whilst reading, and also quite a lot to get out of. So, those are the books that I'm planning to read for the 1900 to 1950 readathon in May. Thank you to Katie for hosting this readathon. If you're interested, I do hope that you will join in too and maybe read some books from that time period, because it's such a wonderful and rich time in literature, and it's really giving me an opportunity to delve into some of the classics that I have been meaning to get around to for quite some time. I'll try and do some reading vlogs and things as the month goes along. Can't promise on those, but we'll at the very least do a wrap up at the end of the month to let you know how many of the books I managed to read, hopefully all of them, and also how I found them. I'm going in with quite high expectations, so fingers crossed that I enjoy this reading month even half as much as I suspect I will. Thank you for watching, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!